welcome in to Coffee Conversations. I'm Josh.
I'm Anna.
And we're so glad that Anna is also here. Just kidding.
I got my coffee this time.
Yes, I'm glad you have coffee, and I have coffee too. Now, somebody asked last time, hey, is there actually coffee in there? Yes, there's actually coffee in here. It's not an empty cup. What kind of a weirdo goes around with a coffee cup without coffee?
I have coffee in mine
All right.
too.
Cheers me. There we go.
Cheers.
Yes, I do this all the time with my 4-year-old. Anyways, so this last Sunday, we got to talk about all kinds of fun stuff. I enjoyed this past Sunday way more than the one before it, right? We talked about divorce. This week, we got to talk about retaliation and the Jesus ethic around that. Mm-hmm. What comes to mind for you when we start talking about retaliation and what Jesus wants and all of that?
I could not stop thinking about like being at camp and with students, and I know you understand this too, like we would always tell students like you can't do prank wars, and they always thought it was because we were not being fun or didn't want them to have fun, but it was always the one-up one another. Like you do this, then our cabin's going to do more, and then the next cabin's going to do more, and it just continues and continues until like, someone's going to the hospital, we're getting phone calls from parents, and so yeah, that's what I just kept thinking of the entire time.
Such a great analogy. I mean, yes, 100%.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we're talking about. Because anytime there's an action that takes place and there's a retaliation to that action, like all it does is birth worse stuff later.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I used to tell the boys in our youth group, I would say, if you do this, just remember I'm much meaner than you and I have more money to spend on these things to retaliate. And
absolutely.
Usually that worked.
That was pretty good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It was always an empty threat, sort of.
No.
Anyway,
Never.
All right, so that's actually a great point, this idea of things are just going to escalate and spin out of control. Mm-hmm. And so Jesus shows up and he says, hey, you heard, as long as it was just this equal retaliation, that's okay. This equal retribution, that's okay. I'm telling you, not a great idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because I think about even times when I've gotten mad about something or something's happened and I want to retaliate, so much more it's me that like is almost internalizing that more, and it's hurting me more than maybe even it would hurt the other person, because it's something I'm holding on to or something that I'm frustrated about that like they don't even remember that they did, and just, yeah, like what does that look like in our life?
That's so true, that we are often just dealing with like our own issues when it comes to that. I'm holding on to this for whatever reason,
right? And
I'm making this about me. At some point, it's not about that they did something to me. It's about that I want to win.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
What else? Anything else that we talked about on Sunday that stood out to you, or that you thought, man, I want to talk a little bit more about that?
I loved the last question that you asked us. Like, what does love require of me? I think that's such a good question to ask, because so often that's not what we're asking in the midst of this. It's like, what more can I do? Or how can I hurt that next person? Or how can I feel better about something? But what does love require of me? And it looks so different in so many different situations.
Yeah. What does love require of me? Like just finding time, I think, to pause is really difficult. Especially when I'm mad about something, right? Yeah. So right. Yeah. So if I can pause long enough, if I can just pause long enough in the middle of that thing, that's a win in and of itself, right?
Right.
Because even if you don't say anything at all, like you're still winning, because you're not just giving this knee-jerk reaction. Mm-hmm. You are rarely at your best, I think. You're rarely at your best when you are giving a knee-jerk reaction.
Absolutely.
That being said, sometimes really difficult things happen, and things have to be addressed, and we have to figure out how to handle them. But if I can control that pause, and nobody else controls it but me. There's that moment between something happened and I address it. There's a moment there. If I can just control that moment and the length of that, then I can find the time to say, what does love require of me?
Absolutely.
And that's when things get sticky.
Right.
Yeah, because we talked about some examples, but let's bring them back up. Is, sometimes love is going to require different things from you. I think about with my daughters. Someone could misconstrue what we're saying here and say, yeah, that you never need to get on them. That's not loving. Like, but it really is. Like, I really do have to discipline, and I really do have to like set a boundary and say, if you go beyond this, then this is going to happen, right? You're not going to get to watch the TV or the iPad. You're not going to get any of that stuff because that's what love requires.
Right.
What about you? What do you see, especially, we talk about teenagers, but, the reality is high school never ends, right?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
what we face in middle school and high school follows us a lot throughout. What do you see happening in teenagers and beyond where they need to figure out, hey, what does love require of me here? Where does this prop up?
I think it props up a lot on like social media. And like if someone, has posted something about somebody, or it's a rumor about somebody, or maybe it's even true. And I think we feel better about ourselves if I can put someone else down sometimes, or like make them feel the way that I feel, or whatever that looks like. And I just keep thinking like it just does so much more damage to me at times. And I have seen that even with our students, like it does so much more damage to you, and to like you getting yourself into this like framework or mental framework or whatever that is, being upset about something, when maybe what love requires most of you is just to step back and not say anything.
What would you say to someone who they said, look, I hear what you're saying, Anna. I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
What would you say? How would you counsel them?
Well, my therapist one time told me to have a junk journal, and sometimes you like write out all the things you're feeling, and then you rip it up and throw it away, and you never actually give it to someone, because sometimes you just got to get those feelings out. Yeah. And that's always been super helpful to me, to be like, okay, like, let me get it all out. It's like the pausing and like taking a step back, having a moment to get out what I'm feeling,
right,
and then ripping it up. No one sees it, and I throw it away.
Right. Well, Abraham Lincoln is famous for having, he would write letters to people, and he'd stick them in his drawer, top desk of his drawer, and leave it there. And the next day, like, he usually would be like, okay, I don't need to send this, and he would burn it.
Yes.
Some people do this with emails. It's a little bit too risky.
I know, it's too risky.
I know.
Yeah.
But I like that, this idea of this junk journal. Like, hey, I'm going to write this out, how I'm feeling about it, and you're processing it. And
right.
Yeah.
That's been helpful.
I think it's important for us to come up with ways to figure out how to work through and to go back to that control, that pause, that moment between, so that we can be our most loving selves. Right? Because realistically, what this world needs more of is love and grace and a whole lot less retaliation.
Right.
We're not always good at it, though.
No.
So maybe where we should end our time is, let me ask you this. There have been times in your life, I'm sure, definitely in my life, when I have not controlled that pause, that moment, and I retaliated, and I did something I shouldn't have done. Like, I said something, or I went a little too far in my response, or I just had that knee-jerk reaction, or I told somebody else something about that person, or whatever. Yeah. What should we do then? If the moments that we go a little too far, what do you think we should be doing to fix it?
I mean, if it was like a person, like, to apologize to them and to say, like, look, I messed up. I think to admit when we realize, like, perhaps that was too far. Maybe it's a conversation with someone. Maybe it's to unsend an email if you can, or to get back together with somebody, and, I mean, to pray about it. And
well, there's that.
I mean, yeah.
We can pray.
Yes, yeah. But I think to own it at times, because I think a lot of times, like, I think it's also really easy if something like this happens that you don't ever address it. You just kind of like let it just slide and you never mention it. But then sometimes things can keep building up, and it's like the same thing with retaliation. Like, you just keep building up, and then you don't want it to like explode with someone. So I don't know, to be upfront and say, hey, this wasn't right, and I'm sorry about that, and let's talk about that.
Which is so hard.
Very hard. I would say, yeah, that would be ideal world. This is what I would want to do. But,
right. I mean,
yes.
all of this takes a level of humility.
Right.
That we have to cultivate and develop. Like some people are naturally more humble than others and willing to put themselves that way, and some are not.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons prayer and consistent prayer is such an important piece of the follower of Jesus' life, is because like, if you're not naturally just a really good person, let's be honest, not everybody is naturally a really great person.
Right.
Some of them are, right? Like we know, like I can think of somebody right now. If I said their name, everybody go, oh yeah, fantastic, love that guy, right? I'm not him. You know, some of us have to work a little bit harder,
Right.
To become a little bit more, look like a little more like Jesus. But we only get there through consistent prayer and reading of the Scripture and allowing God to just kind of rub off on us that osmosis a little bit. Just like when I get around people with very thick Southern accents, mine comes out.
Oh yeah.
Big time, and my wife makes fun of me for it. The whole time. She's like, "Haha, you're doing it," and I'm like, "No, I ain't. You know, this is how I always talk." So basically, get a thick Southern accent from hanging around Jesus is what I'm saying.
There it is. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Anna, for
Thank you.
being here with me. Cheers one more time.
Cheers.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. Have a good one.